What's up, everybody? My name is Uber Brent and welcome to Indie Connect, your one stop for indie Let's Plays and features. Today, I want to talk about something that I've been reading about and had people asking me about for some time now, and that is a very simple question. What makes a game indie? Now, that should come across as a simple answer, but when you stop and think about it, there seems to be a blurred line in today's modern era about what makes a game an indie game. I'm going to take a look at a couple of case studies and see if we can find that blurred line and put it back into focus, or if we can even better define what an indie game is. Before we get too deep into defining an indie game, I feel like a little background needs to be tread. It's a level of game that used to be very prominent and has died off and almost completely disappeared, and that is the mid-tier developer. Now, for definition's sake, we have the obvious AAA big budget games like your Assassin's Creeds, your Call of Duties, your Maddens. These don't need to be defined, it's obvious. Huge blockbuster games with millions of dollars worth of marketing and development sunk into them. Then you have your still AAA titles from first party studios like your Halos, your Uncharteds, those sorts of games. These are all very easily defined as big budget AAA games. However, as early as PS2 era, you would get games from mid-tier developers who were still making full-price $60 games. They weren't the titles on billboards and the sides of buses, they were the games that would try and get like a real rad cover, so when you went to your local GameStop or EB, you would pick it up and kind of hope for the best. These games were coming out of studios such as Volition and Midway Studios that have either folded or joined together to stay more relevant. In today's gaming landscape, you find that indie titles are kind of inhabiting some of the same roles that those mid-tier developers used to inhabit. So, where do we draw the line in the sand? The first case study I want to look at is Glitched from In-House Studios, a game that I have a Let's Play up on my channel if you want to check it out. Glitched is a prime example of how an indie game is typically perceived. It's a small team of developers working without any publisher, and their only funding has come from fans on Kickstarter. This group is not beholden to anybody on how to develop or tell the story of their game other than themselves. You see this so often in the form of games like Cave Story or Undertale, games which oftentimes can be made by a studio as small as one person. Examples of these are littered all over the gaming landscape, and there's even a movie detailing the whole thing, a great documentary called Indie Game the Movie. These are the games we can look at and say definitively that yes, these are indie games. It's important to give an obvious example of an indie game when we look at the next case study, something that will muddy the waters just a bit. Next, we're going to take a look at Inside from Playdead Studios. Now, a lot of how I'm going to describe Inside will sound much like the last list, except for one pretty huge difference. Playdead is a small Danish studio that found funding from the Danish Film Institute to help fund the game, with some of the profits from their last title, Limbo, to help as well. Self-published with its design and scope, all as the studio originally intended and planned. Where this one gets a little bit stranger is in its reveal and obvious affiliation with Microsoft. Signing exclusivity deals, I would have to imagine, would come with a monetary bonus of sorts. And when you start rubbing shoulders with the companies that's building these consoles, it muddies the water on indie versus second party release. The same story goes for Sony and its current darling No Man's Sky. While the publisher is still listed as Hello Games, its exclusivity and giant marketing push really gives it an edge over what would traditionally be considered an indie game. Finally, you get a game like Journey from that game company. Journey has everything that feels like an indie game and is considered by many to be an indie game, but was funded and published entirely by Sony. So, despite the fact that the developers were able to build the vision they had for Journey, this game is nearly the definition of a second-party studio. So, with these examples, where do we draw that line on what is and is not an indie game? I've asked for feedback from some people to see where they thought that line was. Interestingly, not one person gave me the same answer. It ranged from, well, if it's published by anyone other than the developer, it's not indie, to If the cash injection from a publisher is over a certain dollar amount, like I heard 5 million, then it's not indie. 2, as long as the original developer's vision isn't influenced by corporate decisions, it's still indie. It's a wide range of what should and shouldn't be considered an independent game. Ultimately, I think the answer to this question comes down to a little of column A and a little of column B. Where I see the current landscape of gaming is in kind of a new hybrid. There will always be 100% true indie games that are a small group sitting in their basements programming the next Super Meat Boy or Fez, but there's a new form of independent, a sort of AAA indie, if you will. A game that may have started from something small, but grew and gained the attention of a publisher who wants to make an investment. Does that make the game any less indie? No. The only thing that changed was the risk inherent to developing and trying to live their lives. A studio making a game that got so radically popular that their game got in front of the largest audience it possibly could? What's more indie than that? So that's where I think indie games are, and I would love to hear your opinions in the comments below. Tell me, what is that fine line to you where a game crosses from indie to big publisher-owned sweatshop? If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel to see more Let's Plays and indie features, such as this one, because of course that's what keeps the lights on. And as always, keep it locked right here to Indie Connect.